Thank you, Jennifer. So before we get started on today's presentation, we have just a few quick slides about CUTR in general. CUTR was established in 1988 by the Florida legislature, and since then has been providing expertise in the areas of applied research, technology transfer and training, and education. CUTR is multidisciplinary in nature, with experts in economics, planning, engineering, public policy, and geography. An emphasis is also placed on real-world experience, as well as many current CUTR faculty members were in other transportation and transit-related fields before coming to CUTR. CUTR's research program includes 100+ active research projects, $8+ million in annual research, 45 full-time research faculty, and 20+ student researchers. And this slide shows the various programs that CUTR specializes in, as well as being a nationally selected center for both the Nectar and NVRTI programs. CUTR also manages a variety of listservs for programs such as our FTPN planning network and the CUTR Communications listserv. Visit our website for a complete list. Now we have some polling questions for you to get an idea of who our audience is out there today. So how many other people are viewing today's webcast with you? Go ahead and answer that question now. Okay, you can close the poll. And results show that a majority of people are on by themselves. Okay, next question. Is where are you located? Okay, so once again, go ahead and close the poll. And 65% are in the state of Florida, but there's still a wide range of people all over the U.S., so it's good to know. Next question is, what type of organization do you represent? Go ahead and answer that now. Okay, let's close that one. And the final result is an equal between transit and TDM agency and consultants are the highest at 27%, then local government, state DOT at 23%. Okay. Another question, how many other CUTR webcasts have you attended? Go ahead and answer that one now. Okay, you can close it. 33% said 1 to 2, but it's also a wide range, and 20% have listened to 6 or more. Okay, and finally, our last question, specific one to this presentation. Have you ever been involved in preparing a transit development plan? Yes, no, or unsure? Okay, and the final results show it's an even split between yes and no, and one person's unsure. Okay, so that concludes our polling questions. And today's speakers are Rob Gregg, he's the Transit Management Program Director at CUTR, and Bill Morse, Senior Research Associate and a member of Rob's team. Mr. Gregg has extensive experience in all aspects of public transportation, with a heavy emphasis on executive management, intergovernmental partnership coordination, financial analysis, service planning, grant administration, capital improvement programs, market research, public involvement, and transportation planning. Rob's background includes senior positions with HART in Tampa, Florida, Lynx in Orlando, Florida, and RTD in Sacramento, California. Bill Morris has 22 years of transit planning experience and has been involved in public transportation planning in both the operating and research environments. Mr. Morris was a project manager at Lynx and HART in Tampa. At CUTR, Bill has been the principal investigator for major transit development plan updates at several transit agencies throughout Florida. Mr. Morris's area of expertise includes strategic planning, public involvement, service planning, and federal and state grants for public transportation. And with that, I'll turn it over to Rob and Bill for today's presentation on how to develop a TDP and why.
Thank you, Mark. I just needed to unmute. This is Rob Gregg speaking to you from the ivory towers of the University of South Florida in Tampa, Florida. Elevation about 140 feet, maybe 148 because we're on the second floor. What I'd like to do to start off is just explain a little bit about how we'd like to do this presentation for you today. And Bill and I have experience with TDPs from a practical approach of actually doing TDPs for transit agencies and local governments. We have experience in research in certain elements of a transit development plan. And then I think what is very helpful, it's been helpful to me in conducting TDPs, is we're on the side of the fence as we see some of the folks that are with us today, where we've actually implemented a TDP, having experience working with a public transportation agency. Maybe a few words as I try to get this going here. Let me just get to my next slide. A little bit of a dabble of philosophy in conducting a TDP. Every TDP is different, and that's because TDP should be tailored to the specific location and environment that you're working in. For the most part, every TDP is a upward journey, and it could be a very pleasant journey. At times, it could be a very strenuous and challenging journey. So you should always start in a quiet place and really be organized and think about the relevance of this TDP to your organization and the community that you serve. And we're going to get into that today. Another little bit of word of philosophy is as you start to pull together your scope of work and work program in developing a TDP, it's good to just get people acquainted with a sense of strategic planning. And it's always been kind of interesting to me in that a lot of organizations, individual departments, individuals in the organization have a good idea of maybe what they want to do for that day or what they need to do that year. But collectively, they may not have gotten together to think out in a time frame of 5 years or 10 years out into the future. On our agenda today is, as you can imagine, a TDP could take some time to pull together. And we will be talking to you a little bit about what we do here in the state of Florida, but we are going to be talking generically on how to pull a TDP together. But there's no way in 40 minutes or so that we can address every piece of a TDP or give you our practical experience or an approach and methodology. But we will end up with some reference material that can help you get those kind of details. And so we've, Bill and I, William Morris, who's with me, have kind of selected some highlights or some real interest of ourselves that are essential and core to a TDP. So as you can see by our little agenda, we'll be walking you through some major elements of a TDP, really dwell on relevance, talking about how to involve people in the community into a TDP, and some nuts and bolts information on performance and benchmarking issues and objectives that come out of doing a TDP. As I mentioned, we are in the state of Florida, and some of you out there have gone through a TDP. What's significant to share with everybody today is that the state of Florida indeed supports public transportation with funding. It's provided block grant funding to the urbanized areas. And clearly, in order to access those funds, a transit development plan is required. So there's one basic level, at least in the state of Florida, of why do a TDP, because it does mean funding. Again, I said I'm not going to dwell a lot just on FDOT and the state of Florida's environment, but it's worthwhile just to point out to our audience specific pieces of the administrative rule that FDOT administers this block grant from. And just, again, picking and choosing myself on some of these bullets for you is in developing a TDP, it should be that planning, development, and operational guidance of an organization. The TDP must have a public involvement process. And again, my personal opinion, whether it's required by any rule, a public involvement process is extremely important in doing a TDP. One thing that we're going to touch today, FDOT requires a situational appraisal. And that's kind of just a typical strategic approach to things. Some of us know it as SWOTs, looking at our strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. These TDPs in Florida, most that I've worked on in years past have been on a 5-year horizon. Here in Florida, we look at a 10-year horizon, and that kind of helps us bridge the gap into the long-range transportation planning that's required by MPOs all over the country. The TDP just doesn't die the day it's created. It must take life. And so what's required, again, for those funding to flow from the block grants in the state is annual updates and a reporting mechanism. And that, again, follows with very specific submission and deadline requirements. Again, to just give a sense holistically of the elements of an overall TDP, not to say that we're going to talk about every one of these in detail today, but some basics in looking at the community and providing a profile and vision of that of the community that the public transportation agency is serving. An important aspect of looking at the existing system and analyzing that system. How do you conduct business? How productive are you? That situational appraisal I talked about, that will also help in defining needs, issues, and opportunities. Important aspect of a TDP, although not a detailed, comprehensive operational analysis, as some of us know, of getting down to the level of scheduling and stops, but at least some sense of service alternatives, areas to be serviced, what profile of the service is necessary. Then, as I mentioned, that 5 or 10-year planning horizon that really focus, and this is the gut element of a TDP in my view, of producing a capital and operating plan. And then the final element that is sandwiched by 2 other elements, and that is what I personally call the Mobility Action Program. But in a minute or two, we'll talk a little bit about how that actually helps the organization implement the TDP. Between all those elements that I just spoke about is public involvement, and there can be various degrees of public involvement. I think the more public involvement, the more successful you are. And then in any strategic planning process, you develop goals, objectives, and policies. And again, you can take a perspective of initiating those from the beginning and then further developing and refine them, especially as you go out for public involvement. very quickly, and you'll hear this throughout our discussion today as we talk about why a TDP, just to be succinct for you all and something that you all can take with you, is most public transportation agencies are within local governments. There are regional transit authorities or independent authorities, but the public looks at and relates well to a business plan. So some thought should be given of how you develop and present that TDP. Why a TDP optimization? And that, again, gets to the nuts and bolts, and we're going to talk a little bit, again, about that today, of efficiency and coordination and partnerships in the services you might develop. What should be central in any TDP? Why is a customer focus, existing bases of customer markets, as well as future markets. To talk a little bit toward the motivation aspect of a TDP, I've seen myself how important a TDP can be used to actually motivate internal teamwork and implementation. And then finally, we'll talk a little bit more about this, but some of you are very familiar. Why do a TDP? It's about the money. So again, just symbolically, it's important that we consider and develop what is the mission and vision of the organization, what types of services it will has or will develop, and embedded in all of these elements of a TDP is developing processes that could be understood both internally and externally, and that motivational piece of passion. But all of those come together and help us take a look at the opportunities before an organization as a mobility program. I'm going to try to scoot a little bit time-wise on these elements, but here's some categories that you can draw from in developing that mobility vision. And it's my favorite E's of mobility, looking at economy, energy, environment, equity, and emergency. And again, just to be brief on that and articulate what is meant by those, it relates to a political level, a customer level, a community level of their vision of what public transportation means to the economy, what it might mean to energy policy and issues with mobility relative to energy, the environment, and just not typical environment aspects, but talking about sustainability, land use management, growth management, equity, which is always a traditional issue in public transportation. And as an example of emergency that sometimes is forgotten, here in Florida we have things known as hurricanes as well as fires. And public transportation has played a major role in assisting issues regarding emergencies. If I haven't said it often enough, or I haven't said it today, TDP must indeed be relevant to the community it serves. And again, symbolically, looking at that community vision, defining the character of that community. What is it now? What does it want to grow up to be? And certainly the geographical aspects of a community intertwined with the markets that you serve, knowing those markets, knowing behavior and perceptions, and perhaps even altering those behaviors and perceptions in the development of your plan and implementation. And then that mobility aspect, and I emphasize the mobility, not talking specifically about fixed route or rail or paratransit, but almost any type of mobility aspect that your organization might need to serve the community and enhance the vision that community has. With that, let me turn over to my partner here next to me in our plush studios. They're plush because we have a table where we put our microphone on. So let me turn it over to Bill Morris.
Good afternoon, everybody. So Rob has now laid out the framework for the external influences within a community that impact the overall environment in terms of where transit may want to position itself in terms of the overall role. But now there's a place in the planning process where we begin to turn inward, and the agency then begins to examine, well, what are the things that we're doing well that are in alignment with the community's priorities, and then what are some things that about us or what aspects of our service should require greater attention. So with that, then we want to maybe start collecting some data in order to make some of those decisions. So we decided to create a tale of two cities for you. There's a city called Whoville and a city called Whodunnitville. Now, poor Whoville is quite a mess. Transit has a terrible image in the community. People just think it's nothing but a social service. The fleet is old and the buses are breaking down. Operations is having all kinds of labor issues. Maintenance complains that they can't fix the buses because they're too busy responding to road calls because the buses are break down. And customers are complaining that service is not on time, and of course it's not on time because the buses break down. And so transit is often in the news. It's mostly bad, and jurisdictions are annually threatening to end their funding for transit. So things aren't real good in Whoville, but correspondingly in Whodunnitville, they recently did complete a strategic plan to transition the agency from a social service orientation to mobility management. And then they established a plan to maximize ARA and other capital grants to replace their buses, in some cases even expansion buses, launched an employees relations program, commissioned a master plan to determine current and future facility needs, and established a media relations plan to actually promote positive transit initiatives in the community. They developed an outreach program for funding partners for their jurisdictions and then established new transit routes that they may want to pursue. And in this fictional account of our Tale of Two Cities, what we find with what happened is, if you look at annual passenger trips, Whodunnitville was actually able to achieve a ridership at a level that is more than double of Whoville. So we're showing you, this is an example, actually a real example of two communities that demographically are pretty much exactly the same, but yet one can achieve ridership that is at least twice the other. So now what might we do for Whoville? What can we do to help Whoville out in terms of their overall place in the community? Well, first thing to do,
Notice those passenger trips.
First of all, who is Whoville? We can look at demographic data and actually plot that demographic data through GIS and make maps. Now, the Census Bureau used to be the primary source of information for population, household, economic data, and commute data. The Census Bureau has since significantly changed the way they do business, which we're not going to have time to talk about that, but there are other products that are coming onto the marketplace. One specifically is Ezra, which is the maker of ArcGIS, and they have access to several databases around the country in which they are able to report very rich and robust data. So this particular map that you're looking at is clusters of unemployment within a community, with red clusters being the higher clusters. And that is actually gained from a database of unemployment claims and the addresses from which those claims come. But there are several other sets of data that you can look at within the community. And then another thing to do is really start to classify the services that you're providing now, but even services that might be realistic for the community in the future. Thinking about the market in the area, maybe some major corridors that could be potentials for BRT, but then also looking towards the trip types of services. But the idea is most systems have fixed route transit and paratransit, but then might we want to consult with the community and see if there are other service types that they feel might be more realistic in the future. And in some cases, things like light rail and heavy rail, because of the densities, just might not ever be feasible in the future. And then really start to lay out what is our system like, meaning what is our current quality of service, what are the parameters of service. So here is an example of the frequencies of service at the route level for weekdays, Saturdays, nights, and Sundays. And then here is a performance report that basically takes some data at the route level and then looks at certain performance indicators, in this case passengers per total mile and passengers per total hour, as a measure of productivity, and then ranks each of those routes in the system. And this is really important too later as we begin to prioritize service improvements. It's really good to have some kind of a sense of what our top performing routes are versus our medium or our low performing routes. This is an overlay of a route network over the jurisdictions within a particular service area. This can demonstrate equity, although there are other ways to demonstrate equity. And in fact, with some of your demographic maps, even the route network can be overlaid over certain demographic characteristics that you might be interested in. What about span of service for the existing family of services that you have now? Again, lay that out and begin to have that data available. And then we have what's called a peer and trend. Now, a trend analysis is where we take performance indicators of a transit agency and you look at that over time, and then also compare your current data against peer transit systems around the United States that are much like yourself, which I'm going to show you here in a second in a graphic. But there are multiple ways to select peers using a series of demographic, economic, and even national transit database factors such as county population, population density, per capita income, vehicles operated in maximum service, an NTD measure, total operating expense, and then in some cases even a regional adjustment based on where systems are throughout the United States. So what this graphic is now showing you is over a period of 4 years, passenger trips increased for the target agency by 18%, but then when compared to all of the peers that were selected for this particular target system, the agencies are operating well below the peer mean for the peer group. So these are ways that we can begin to establish benchmarks for our TDP in terms of what we want to look like in the future. So switching to public involvement now, there are a number of strategies that can be employed. I'm not going to read all of these that are on the slide to you, but also understand technology is changing, and things like web-based campaigns and surveys and different ways to engage the public. But then also remember, most transit agencies are always engaging in public involvement. If a neighborhood group asks someone from the transit agency to come out and talk to them, then that's public involvement. It's just a function of making sure that you keep those recorded and over time. And then there's the onboard passenger surveys. One feedback that we often get in communities are, what are you doing to engage the riders? What are you doing to engage the customers? Well, in an onboard survey, you're almost targeting the customers as being your most important public, because with an onboard survey, you can gauge things like customer satisfaction. One of the things I always say is that when our customers tell us what they don't like about our service, they're telling us why our potential customers do not ride. But there are other things that we can gain from an onboard survey, such as origin, destination, how long people have been riding, why they use the system, how many days a week do they use the system, and what type of fare do they pay. So we get a very, very good profile of our customers with an onboard survey. And here's an example of the age breakdown. One of the things you can do here is, for instance, what is the composition of seniors in your community as a whole versus what is the composition of seniors on your system? Same with youth. And then you can also, if you do periodic onboard surveys, you can then track your composition as it may change or stay the same over time. All right, I'm going to now go over another thing that Rob indicated in our agenda that we're going to highlight today, which is the situation appraisal. Rob?
Are you going to do it, or am I going to do it?
No, you're going to.
No, I'm going to do it. Just playing with you. I emphasized previously the aspect of here in the state of Florida, how this is actually a required element of a TDP, but regardless of that requirement, it is that SWOT exercise. It's an aspect of a TDP where you can really address some internal issues, some technology issues, political issues, how you sit in the community, by really taking a look at the relationship with mobility, with employment, with geographical aspects of access, particularly with land use development and orientation for public transportation. Just taking a note here, as a public agency, you normally have an image in our little example of Whoville, and there might be an image, a poor image of public transportation. And in developing a TDP, you can use it as a marketing tool. And certain aspects maybe of bringing that to light would be establishing that it is the agency's business plan. It is a sense of how you exhibit the accountability for the need and demand of services in the community. It portrays how you will be efficient. You are efficient in looking at peer and trend, or how you have targeted improving efficiency. And again, underlying all of this is the funding aspects. It's always kind of interesting to me to go in a community and know that how there's a lack of knowledge in the community about how the existing system is funded, and the true cost and perhaps investment needs in more mobility services. Again, I'm going to go internal a bit with regard to that TDP and how you may not only use it for external marketing purposes, but how it can help you within, internal to the organization, and almost create what I'm calling an organizational poetry of who does what and why, and how we do it together. A number of the TDPs that Bill and I have been involved with actually involve a team building exercise, and it helps, particularly in large organizations. Some of you may be out there and realize that you might occasionally bump into the planner or the scheduler or the maintenance folks or the operators of the system, but it helps bring people together, understanding their aspects of the organization, what their perspective is, and how might you, going through the TDP process, have that involvement, have them involved with workshops or focus groups that really help with that organizational alignment. So to broaden that a little bit, not only talking about those internal partners that you want to analyze and perhaps articulate in a TDP, looking at the various aspects of the organization, but also those external potential partners, local governments that you may be part of or associated with, other agencies. I can't tell you how beneficial a TDP is for federal and state partnerships, communication with the MPO and the urban planning process, and then most importantly, of course, with your customers and the public in general, but also taking a focus on the business community. Again, relative to the strategic planning process, again, based on experience, perhaps the most influential TDPs that I've worked on is when the board is actually going through a visioning process or a reevaluation of its vision and policies. That is really instrumental in maybe setting the table and developing a TDP so that there is a direct relationship with the board's vision and issues. And it's really great if those things are happening concurrently, because some of the feedback and analysis that Bill touched on today gets back, some of these facts get back to the board so they have a clear understanding of what the challenges and opportunities of the agency are. A number of agencies that we've worked with have brought that TDP back to the table annually and actually have set annual objectives with the board, particularly with the budgetary process of the organization. So now let's get into the perspective of you've done various elements of a TDP. You're doing your internal, external communications. You're getting some great input. But how do we focus on the plan?
So one of the first things we want to do then is classify the types of service changes that could take place, and then prioritize those service changes, and then finally at the end program those service changes. So as you go through all of your various analyses and public involvement processes and all the various inputs, there are operational changes that could be made to service, things like short-turning a route, splitting a route, through routing, taking two routes and making them one. There are alignment changes that can take place based on community needs, whether it's extending or shortening a route, implementing new routes, redistributing service to different parts of the service area, and overall changes to the network structure. Schedule changes are also considered existing improvements to existing services, such as increasing frequencies on route, increasing the span of service on weekdays or on weekends, and then also schedule coordination between routes. And then finally with fares, we're looking at the overall fare structure and the revenue stream. What kind of first boarding fare do we have versus transfers?
Bill, just letting you know you have about 10 minutes remaining.
Okay. So in prioritizing then those services, we look at performance criteria as we talked about before. So for instance, if the priority is to increase the span or frequency of service, then we may want to do that on our highest performing or our highest growth routes. We can also look at funding. For instance, there may be a service that actually has local support, or the board has decided it's going to fund, or we have new services that are eligible for ever-changing and ever-growing state and federal grants. We could have services for new development, and then as well for future needs. And remember, in prioritizing all of these various service improvements, it's always okay to maintain a candidate list of projects for which funding is not available, because those projects, must be in the TIP or the SDIP in order to be considered in the future. So then from there, once those services are prioritized, then really begin to program. Let the public and the board know, hey, this is what we plan to do each year. We may have to adjust this in the future, but give everybody a sense of, well, what are going to be the service hour growth, what is going to be the bus growth, what is going to be the annual cost of changes to service. But have a plan in place to be able to prioritize those improvements over a period of years. And this all then leads to kind of the crescendo of a capital and operating plan, where we have a capital component, where you have, not only a fleet replacement plan, but also an expansion plan if new services are called for, but then also infrastructure, facilities, shelters, amenities, etc. And then classify your operating program in terms of your federal, state, and local funds, and then also any forecasting of revenues that you have over the next several years, and then organizational development issues that would play into the capital and operating plan. And the next slide, what we're attempting to show you is, just from the standpoint of spreadsheets, Florida does have a TDP financial planning tool. But the most important thing is to lay out what are your projected revenues, what are your projected costs, and then what are your shortfalls, so that you have a sense of what your unfunded needs are, whether they be capital or whether they be operations in terms of service improvements in the future. Ron?
Yeah, I flipped on another slide while Bill was talking, and again, just to emphasize the point, here's the nitty-gritty of output for TDP, where you're actually programming by year potential service improvements along with related capital needs. And this bodes well when you share this with your finance department, and they've had input in this cost allocation and these calculations internally. Here's, as we scoot along with time here, here's just an example of a schedule of a typical TDP. Sometimes you get the time that's needed. Ideally for me, it's kind of like the human gestation period. You need like 9 months. The point I'd like to make, it would be some transit agencies don't look at it as let's do a TDP, but it's a continuous process through the year, relates to their budget, relates to their work program, and it makes that much easier to do annual updates or a complete major update of a TDP. I'd like to leave you with some quick references, and as I get into these references, just want to share with you how we are blessed in Florida with our Florida Department of Transportation. A lot of the materials that we've collected and put together relate to a training program that FDOT has sponsored, and you'll see even some of our references to a website that you'd probably want to access to get some real detailed information that we weren't able to cover today. So relative to that, I suggest for further information and references is read the book. We at CUTR, in partnership with FDOT, they funded and sponsored this effort, created a guidance to developing a transportation development plan. Another research-related item that Bill and I thought might be good to present to you today is a TCRP report 141, which helps you with that component we briefly touched on, looking at peers, trends, and it helps develop some performance objectives. We've done some NCTR research and a synthesis of some best practices in transit service planning. As I think you've heard, and those familiar with the TDP, a real core is what's the service about. Some other reference materials that we have available is down to the operational level of looking at scheduling and approaches and efficiencies in scheduling, to a generalized look at if you were a new agency, how might you start up, what are the issues, what are the funding opportunities. Here's if I could convey anything to y'all today as far as a reference, because a number of the things we just mentioned are accessible at our website. And again, FDOT with CUTR has developed within the state our Florida Transit Planning Network, and that's at planfortransit.com. And you can access some good information at that website, and it particularly has a page relative to a TDP Resource Center. If you go to that Resource Center, you could download that manual that I mentioned, as well as a number of other resources and templates that we've developed here in the state of Florida. So with that, I'll just leave you with the word for today that don't let that TDP sit when it's done. And if you've done a good job to involve the community and the political realm, there's an anticipation of a strategic plan, so how do we do it? And so a number of agencies have taken that, maybe taken all of the background data that's been analyzed, but created brochures or a logo or a sense of this is where we are aligning with the vision of our community to be a true mobility manager in the community. Let me stop there, Mark, and perhaps you can take over from here.
Great, Rob. Thanks for a great presentation, Rob and Bill. We have about 15 minutes for some questions. So if you have any questions, go ahead and enter them now. I'll start this session off with a question. And how can we convince my organization to do a strategic plan?
Want me to take it? Yeah. Okay. We'll both take it. I guess as I listen to that question, it might imply that maybe somebody is resisting it, or maybe again that philosophical point we started with, and that is what is this TDP? Is it just to comply with accessing funds, or is it a bit more? I think you need to start at the top. And then stop at the top, meaning the senior management, the executive director of the organization, in coordination with the board, should establish the very beginning of what this TDP is about. How is it your business plan? How does it relate to the community? Usually the board is a representation of the community served. So I would start there.
Okay, we got another question come in. What is a good way to use your TDP as a guideline for daily, weekly, monthly decisions? How can it be used to guide one's vision for our organization?
Well, actually, in some cases, the mobility action plan that is included in the TDP can include different goals and objectives and initiatives at the department level. And in a lot of cases, as part of those team building exercises, that can be an outcome, is to have, a TDP that has objectives at every department level so that they can then, over time, compare how they are meeting the benchmarks of their goals and objectives with the overall TDP.
So again, to add to Bill, we have limited time today, but we did talk about that either an action plan that comes out of the TDP. I've been in environments where that indeed becomes the annual work program for an organization, and it involves human resources, it involves supervisors, and so it really becomes embedded in the organization that this is my job individually and how I relate to the rest of the organization. And that's a daily process, a weekly process, a performance evaluation.
Okay. Another question. Can you give us a sense of how much preparing a TDP should cost?
There could be a range there, and Bill can work up numbers if specifically for you if you like. But here's my way of answering that. It depends what the scope is. It depends how you want to pull it together. In my past life with a transit agency, I would turn to my planning and marketing folks and see what they're doing already and what might be available as far as data or input in developing goals and objectives for the TDP. So it really comes down to designing a scope, taking a look at what you might be able to provide internally. Most of us are very busy in a transit organization, and we reach out for technical assistance or consultant support. And that could also be very, very beneficial in particularly in one element of a TDP when you're dealing with stakeholders in your own board. You want a third party to come in and really probe the situation, see what the board thinks of the organization, see what the political bodies think about the organization. So I can't give you an answer. It could be from $50,000 to $250,000. It could lead into more intensive type of work activities, but it's a broad perspective, and it really would have to be tailored to what your needs are.
Okay, another question. In addition to the requirements for a TDP, what others have included to make the TDP an innovative product, to make it go beyond the state requirements and truly be a marketing tool?
You want to take a shot, Bill, or?
Well, I mean, I've certainly seen engagement campaigns for a TDP that highlights other initiatives of the agencies, sometimes even the MPO. And of course, obviously, with just the marketing initiatives that come out of the TDP for transit services, and then actually implementing those marketing initiatives over time.
I've seen a number of agencies, again, use their TDP, and not just the physical document, but polish it, make brochures out of it, make advertisement out of it, but using the TDP to communicate with the public. And, we didn't have a lot of time to dwell on public input, but it also is a continuation of that public involvement. And you, as an agency, especially in these times of budgetary constraints, need that public support, need that grassroots support, need to be sensitive of how you're performing. And by providing the elements of a TDP, it really can go far for you.
Okay, here's an interesting one. Traditionally, who should be conducting the TDP? Is it the transit system or the MPO?
Well, Bill, I'll start it, but I mean, I've worn many hats, including MPO as well as with a transit agency. And in my view, the best situation is a partnership among the MPO and the agency. Been in environments, and some of you out there probably can relate to it, where there's been actually financial support by both entities. But if they're not both involved, you fall short. You could have a TDP that is so introverted that nobody knows where it's going, or you could have one that's very, very interrelated to the long-range planning aspects and various urban funds that come along. So my word would be whoever takes the lead. My preference, of course, when I was with an agency is the agency. But even as working in a TDPO and being staffed to a TDP, an MPO, I would prefer that the transit agency takes the lead, but there's a close partnership from the very beginning with the MPO.
Okay, a listener wants to know if you could talk more about ridership forecasting in TDPs.
Bill's shaking his head, what I'll put on the table for you, Bill, maybe to respond to is we have developed, and part of the FDOT process here in the state is developing certain tools, a modeling tool, which is known as TBES. But those don't stand alone. That aspect of service planning and certain techniques in looking at markets and developing forecasting is important. So that was my kickstart for Bill.
Well, TBES basically has a lot of flexibility in terms of playing around with it, essentially. That's the term I use. In other words, you can come up with different scenarios. You can look at existing system improvements and isolate them, whether you want to test a scenario that only increases evening service, or look at a scenario that combines evening service with frequency improvements on weekdays. But then even more than that, you can play with the network, and you can put in 20 to 30 new routes in a system, and TBES will give you an answer as to what the expected ridership for that would be. It doesn't mean they would ever translate into policy or projects that are proposed or funded or prioritized. But it is, I think, a very good tool for showing you basically what your existing system will look like in 10 years and give you some comparative analysis of how different service improvements might impact demand, and then be able to look at new services over time.
Mark, I want to deviate a little bit from your question just to make a point that I like to make in talking about a TDP, and that is forecasting. We tend to just focus on fixed route, and I think what we miss is components of paratransit or demand response. And we also maybe missed the point for my transportation demand management folks out there, the point of if you're a true mobility manager, you really should take holistically look at the entire transportation system. And you want to help manage people into various modes, but commuter assistance can play a very important role, and those are your customers. Those should be counted as ridership, and those who have van pool programs know that it has actually assist you in your formula allocations to consider that commuter assistance portion of services in the region.
Okay, I have a question specific to the minor updates, and that is what are the guidelines for public involvement for minor updates of the TDP?
They're somewhat, I guess, written up wise. They're a bit limited, other than it needs to be acted upon by the governing board, that it is a report is provided to the board in a public environment, and comments are provided. I've seen a number of agencies really go way beyond what is maybe not written specifically, but constantly involving the public. And again, these days with budget constraints and issues about funding, that needs to be presented, and the public, you should be wise and involve the public with that. But as far as minor updates, I mean, I don't think there's an extensive public involvement program defined. within the state requirements, but there certainly is an implied a continuous public involvement.
Okay, another question. This one's a political one. Does the implementation of a 10-year plan ever get derailed with changes in board membership or changes in political winds?
Does an annual budget ever get impacted or derailed? Sure. But I guess from my perspective, and I don't know what yours is, Bill, because you've had some experience here, and that is what I like about the process we're going through here in Florida is we were looking at a 5-year horizon, and we would have 20 or 30-year long-range plan horizons. What I think the 10-year horizon does is kind of bridge the gap and give a perspective so that you can come back to the political realm and say, you just can't keep on putting this off to the last year of the TDP. Look where we are now. Look where we want to be, maybe midterm in the future, and really get a handle on it. But again, my response to that question is, if you don't have a strategic plan, where are you? Where are you with the political whims?
The answer is derailment is absolutely possible. I have seen it. From a very, very pro-transit commission to all of them getting voted out of office for a totally non-pro-transit commission. So, yes, it can happen.
And it goes to the point we were talking about earlier. Again, we've only been able to scratch the surface here. But dealing with the board and stakeholders, it's good to deal with the policy board in a strategic environment, as well as maybe to have that TDP with you for an orientation of new appointees to your board.
Okay, we got, I think, one more question here. What about receiving approvals from MPOs, counties, towns, and other stakeholders? Is it worth getting them each to individually approve the TDP?
Specifically, the rule says that the governing body is the adopting agency of the TDP, and that pretty much is FDOT's requirement. I think anything else would be optional. The custom, of course, has always been to get an endorsement from the full TPO, which usually does have representation from most of the jurisdictions involved in transit.
Strategically, I've been in environments with a regional transportation authority, and strategically, we would go to the governing bodies of every jurisdiction within that area. And surprisingly, at least to me, we would see again that local flavor where even smaller urbanized areas would buy more service or promote more service. So I think strategically it's important, whether it's a formal adoption, there should be that communication process and respect of the input from the jurisdictional level to a TDP.
Okay, I think we're about out of time here. And I'd like to thank Rob and Bill for a great presentation, and for everyone for listening in. Our next webcast is March 8th, 2012, tracking costs of alternatively fueled buses in Florida. That will be presented by Alexander Kolpakov. So once again, that's March 8th, 2012. And the final thing, I'd ask that you please complete this short 3-question survey about how you feel the webinar was. And with that, I'd like to thank everyone, and that's it.